Good afternoon. My name is Alex Cooper, mental health nurse. I'm here to speak to you about transactional analysis from a management of violence and aggression background. Okay. So the aims of today's session are to understand the basic principles behind transactional analysis and to be able to apply the transactional analysis theories into examples of recent incidents in your own work. Okay. So first of all, what is transactional analysis? So thinking about three examples, have you ever spent the day being an adult, and then suddenly you visit your parents and you start reverting to a child as they tell you off for something or express their displeasure? Or have you been in a group of friends where somebody will dominate the conversation, make themselves the sort of leader of the pack, make it hard for you to talk over them, and you sort of agreeing with what they say or going along with whatever they do? Or have you ever found that there's somebody, whether it's in a work setting or a social setting, that manages to sort of leave you feeling intimidated, and then you sort of always think to yourself, oh, one day, this is a strong personality, maybe I want to change this now and I can be more assertive, but you never actually do. So Dr. Eric Byrne, quite a long time ago, looked at these sort of principles and developed what's called transactional analysis, a framework behind which suggests the main factors of these situations continuing to play out in the same way that they do over time is not due to the other person's behaviour, but actually our own. Okay, so what Byrne suggests is that we can shift between three ego states based on our thoughts, emotion, and behaviours. So what are these three ego states? The first one is the parent state. And the parent state is where your thoughts, emotions, and behaviours mimic those of a known parent or authority figure. That may be your parents growing up, the way that you see your grandparents acting towards people, a boss that you had when you were younger, or a teacher, just some other authoritative figure, looking at the way that they respond to certain people. That you might mimic that in your parent state. So it's something that you've observed and something that you'd mimic. So the middle one is the adult state, and that's where your thoughts, emotions, and behaviours are at the present day, and you can draw on an objective, reasonable conclusion based on your life experiences so far. And lastly, we've got the child state. This is where your thoughts and emotions and behaviours revert back to how they were when you were a child. You instantly react based on the emotions you're experiencing at that moment in time. So there you have your three ego states, and what we're going to do is we're going to put these into an example. So the example is you're an adult and you're walking past a child who's drawing graffiti on a wall. So how would a parent respond? A parent in this situation it depends, there's two subcategories to this, the controlling parent and the nurturing parent. So the controlling parent is, if your parents would have taken an authoritative response to rule breaking when you were younger, you'd be likely to mimic this approach and attempt to discipline the child. Go up to the person, go up to the artist, tell them what are you doing, tell them off, you're an authoritative figure and you tell them that they shouldn't do this, you're actively stepping into this one. Then there's the nurturing parent. So if you had a more lenient childhood, you may react with more concern for the child, worried about them, what situation have they got themselves into, what else could they be getting up to, and you'd be concerned and attempt to intervene and ask them, show some concern for their well-being, or ask where they could go to be in a more supportive environment. Okay, so how would a child respond to this? So first of all, you've got your adapted child. This is your child that knows right from wrong, and it's learnt how the parent is and learnt how he's going to respond to that. So they feel a sense of wrongdoing, a sense of right and wrong, and a sense of guilt. So in this situation, you might feel like you need to go away from the situation and report it to an authoritative figure. What you've done is you've reverted to your child self, and what you want to report it to the adult. Okay, secondly, you've got the free child. So this is the free, unrestricted child, and the very creative child. And what this child state might want to do is join in, whether or not the person wants them to. You've got no regard for anybody, and you just want to please yourself. And then finally, how would an adult react? So what an adult does in situations is they draw on their experiences of life that they had right from being a child to being an adult. So what they make is an informed decision. So based on their life history, an adult might walk past and appreciate the artwork, understand it's the artist's decision to be there, whatever the setting is. Could be a lot of variables. It could be a creative space or whatever. And they wouldn't feel personally threatened by the actions of what's going on. They'd respect the artist's decisions and respond based on all their past experiences. Okay, so what they say in transactional analysis is that the adult state is more reliable, as it can draw on experiences to make an informed decision. This is not discounting that the other states are bad, because they have their own benefits in certain situations, what I'll get to later on in the presentation. However, on balance, the adult state is preferred, certainly in psychology and therapy. Okay, so the first task is I want you to discuss with your partner for 2 minutes examples of when you've reverted into each state and why. So I want you to sit down and think about times in your career or your personal life, whether that's relationships with your partner, with your children, with your friends, or with your work colleagues, or with somebody you've been involved in teaching with. So when you've adapted your parent state, when you've adapted your child state, and when you've adapted your adult state. So that's 2 minutes, and then you can get back to me. Okay, so next we're going to talk about state fluidity. So the concept of state fluidity is that people actually actively change through these states, through these ego states, depending on how on the to and fro of these conversations, situations. So change between states and how we perceive the experience at any one time. So that can be experience or a person. So for example, 1, Tom is an adult and he arrives late for football training. The coach becomes angry at Tom, changing from an adult to his controlling parent state, and shouts at him, "You're late." So based on Tom's experiences, he reverts from an adult to his adapted child state, apologising whilst looking sad. "Oh, I know, I'm sorry." So the coach then feels bad for shouting at Tom, adopting his nurturing parent state. He attempts to appease the situation, asking Tom about his wife and kids, mimicking the adult state, hoping that Tom will change to this state and bring back the balance again. So fortunately, in this example, what Tom does is he engages with the coach, once again adopting his adult state. Okay. And what this is a complementary transaction. So when one adult reverts to a parent and the other adult reverts to a child, or vice versa, so this is called a complementary transaction. This means we've got a balance. We've always got a person or persons which adopt the child state, and we've always got a person or persons that adopt the parent state, or everybody on the adult state. Okay, so we've got a balance. We've got one person doing one, and one responds to a person in an appropriate manner. So these complementary transactions are classed as stable when it comes to psychology and therapy, and can go on indefinitely. So imagine that you're always the child to your parent. You're always going to act as a child, and then your parent's always going to respond accordingly. You know, they might reward you, and they might talk over you, they might be nurturing, but they're still going to have that relationship. However, we come into difficulty when 2 people adopt the same ego states. I've got an example for you next. So this is called cross-interaction. So looking back at our first example, we've got Tom and his coach shouted at him for being late. So that was the coach's parent state aiming at Tom's child state. And at first, he responded to it as he would as a child. But in this example of cross-interaction, Tom shouts back at his coach, says, "Don't you shout at me." So you've got 2 people here trying to be in their parent states. These cross-interactions are classed as highly unstable and usually result in the transaction either stopping or, more often than not, a shift in ego states. So somebody actually shifts, somebody has to give at some point, and that again is based on previous experiences. So currently both people, Tom and his coach, are in their parent state. So in our example, Tom continues to shout at his coach and threatens not to play the weekend if his coach continues to shout at him. The coach eventually submits and reverts into an adapted child state, apologising for his aggressive behaviours and asking what he can do to make it up to Tom. This creates a psychologically balanced situation. So based on the information that I've just given you about the 3 ego states, how people can shift between them, and then how there are complementary states, and then there are cross interactions where people sort of have the same state, and it creates an imbalance and an unstable situation. What I want you to do is look at the video below and write down the shifts in ego states and discuss this afterwards. work here.